Go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. So we will continue from where we left over in the first workshop. As you might have guessed, this is what we are going to be covering. First, we are going to study about linear regression, what it is, how to define the loss and its cost function. Then we will go on to how we minimize that loss, right? So how we get the best results. We'll do something very similar in logistic regression. You don't need to know what it all means. I'm just doing it so you understand what is going on later. Okay, and then I'll give you a short introduction of how to train and test data, and then we'll move on, and Rohan will show you actually how to implement it in Python. All right, so let's start with linear regression with one variable. Right now we're only doing it with one variable. Okay, I'll come back to this later, but okay, I'll come. All right, so the first problem we're going to solve is something like see, you're given the size in feet squares of all the houses in a city and the corresponding price according to it. So, for now, in our universe, the price of a house only depends on how big it is, right? So, all the x's you have are the points in this plot, and what we are trying to find out is this line. This is the best fitting line for this graph, right? So, if I was to give you a random value over here, so this line would give you the best possible estimate of what the true price of the house may be. All right. So this is what we're trying to find out. Since this line is linear line, this algorithm is called linear regression. All right. All right. See, this is just for your notational consistency. The total number of m is the total number of training examples we have. All these the red dots that you see, these are say m. All right, I'm just telling you a little bit of notation. X's are the input value or the features. See, the features is called whatever the input values we have. Right now, we only have one feature, which is size in feet. Uh, did someone say something? All right,
If someone has a doubt, you can raise your
yeah.
hand and then unmute yourself. Otherwise, please stay muted.
All right. One thing I forgot to mention is that you can put your doubts in the comments. We have members who are going to in the chat. We have members who will reply to you. All right. I'll also give you time when you can ask me any doubts by unmuting yourself. Okay. So like I was saying, the x's are the features. Right now we only have one feature or one variable on which the price of the house depends, and it is the size in feet square. Afterwards, we will see that the actual size, the price of the house might depend on how old the house is and what is the locality, etc. So all these are considered as features. And y is the output variable or the target variable, which is obviously the price of the house. I hope it's clear. Okay, so how do we do what we have? So we have the training set initially. It is the sum amount of data of the x and y coordinates of the above plot, and then we put it through some learning algorithm, right? We'll learn about it right now. This h is nothing but this h is called the hypothesis function. It is represented as h theta of x. We'll get to that later. Okay, so h theta of x, after we have learnt an algorithm, right? This line is what we get, and we just put through any size of the house or any amount of features that we have a new point. For instance, this new point, I can put a new point, and it will just give me the output value y corresponding to it. All right. Okay. So now we will study what is called a cost function. Uh, so first I'll introduce to you what we are trying to do. So we have a hypothesis function h theta of x. Because it is linear problem, you know that any linear line in 2D space can be represented as y equal to mx plus c. This is just the same thing, right? We just represent this parameters theta naught and theta 1. Now our question is, because we are trying to find the best fitting line, all right? So what should be the value of theta naught and theta 1 such that we get this best fitting line over here, right? That is our task. All right. So yeah. Okay, so this is our this side is our original question. For now, forget about this. We'll just solve a simplified version. All right. Say that there is no theta naught. Okay, there is no theta naught, and we only have a theta 1x. This is nothing but a line passing through the origin. Okay. So what we do is we define a loss function or a cost function j theta 1, and it is defined somewhat like this. All right. Say that our line was like this, and this is the price and this is the size. Say our initial line was like this, and this is our point that we have. Now to get the best possible line, it should pass through the origin, pass through this point, right? This would minimize the error. So that is why we define the error as a predicted value minus the true value. This is the true value. This is the predicted value, and then we square it, right? I hope you can understand why we are squaring it, because the error can be both negative, below this x point can be both below it and above it, right? But we always want to see it as an error. Is it clear? I hope it's clear. If it's not, then put it in the chat. So we always you could have either taken a modulus over here, or we square it. Squaring is better. Like, we don't really care about its value. You'll see later. We only wish to minimize it. So now that we have our cost function, we want to choose such theta such that this cost is minimized, right? Which is again, we want to find the best fitting line. For instance, see over here, all these are our points and they lie in a straight line. If theta 1 is equal to 1, right? If the value of parameter is equal to 1, then this line passes through all the points. So what would be the loss? The loss will be 0 here. All right. Similarly, if for the same amount of points we had theta 1 equal to 0.5, then it would be, the slope would be something like this. This time there will be an error. You can see these errors, right? So you can calculate the loss. It would be 1 upon 2 into 3, as we have 3 amount of data, and you can sum it over. For instance, for right now, this value is 1, and this would be 0.5. So the loss will be 0.5 square. I mean, yeah, I guess you understand. You can sum it over. And this, if theta 1 is equal to 0, then again you just drop it down below. You calculate this graph and you square it and sum it over all these 3 values. Right, that is how you find the loss. So obviously the minimum loss right now will be this. This is the best fitting line, and we are trying to find this theta 1 that gives the best fitting line. All right. Okay. Yeah, so now we come back to our original problem, which was a general line passing through a plane and not just through the origin, right? So we come back to 2 parameters, theta naught and theta 1. The question, however, remains exactly the same. Only replace theta 1 by these 2 variables, theta naught and theta 1. Okay, now we have to choose 2 parameters. We have to find out 2 parameters, theta naught and theta 1, such that this loss is now minimized. All right. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. One thing you might have already guessed is the reason this thing, when we choose this as the mean squared, this is called the MSE loss or the mean squared error. Okay, so you can guess that if I put this theta 1 xi over here, right? So I would get j of theta 1 equal to 1 upon 2m summation theta 1 x, theta 1 x of I minus y of I whole square, right? So when you expand this and you plot it with j of theta 1 and theta 1 over here, this would be something like a quadratic graph, right? Theta, this whole, after you open the whole square. So you can get some sort of intuition that this curve has exactly one minima, right? So for exactly one value of theta 1, you would have the best possible fitting line. Similarly, when you have it for theta naught, when we are trying to find it for theta naught and theta 1, this it is a bit difficult to show in because it is a 3D picture, but this too will have only one minima right over here, as you can see it. This sort of function is called a convex function, all right, or a bow shaped function. This is why the error, the cost function we chose is a very selective value, and we use it generally in when we need a convex function. Okay, now let's take a detour. Keep everything above in your mind right now, but we'll take a detour about and we'll learn about the gradient descent. Okay, what is gradient descent? Say we have some function j of theta naught and theta 1, and we want to minimize. We want to again choose theta naught and theta 1 such that this is minimized, right? Of the curve, of the bow shaped curve, we want to find the minimum possible value, right? So this algorithm just has two steps. All right, we start with some any random value of theta naught and theta 1, right? We start over here in the 2D curve. You can say we just start over here, something over here, any random value. Then we just keep changing theta naught and theta 1 such that the j of theta naught and theta 1 keeps on reducing until we hopefully end at a minimum. I'll show you it. We just want to reduce it one by one. See step like this and hopefully reach the minimum. Why do I say hopefully reach the minimum? Because for the linear regression problem, yes, the curve is bow shaped, but it is not always true, right? If you choose a wrong algorithm, you might end up a curve looking something like this. This curve has multiple minimas, right? One over here, something over here. So if the gradient descent is employed on a non-convex function, right, or a non-bow shaped function, it might not end up at the global minima, but instead it might end up at a local minima over here. So you need to be careful uh, that the function you're choosing, and the function depends on the cost function, right? It needs to be convex. All right. So a little more about the gradient descent algorithm. This okay. I'll first you read this, and I'll explain why this works. So all we do is after choosing. So first step was choose random theta naught and theta 1. And this is the second step. We repeat until convergence theta j and change this to the previous theta j minus alpha derivative of partial derivative of the cost function with respect to theta j. All right. And one very important thing to note is that we do it simultaneously, right? Read this once. So we define a temporary variable, then a temporary variable 2, and afterwards we assign it, right? And this is the incorrect method. If we first do it for one variable and then assign it, because of this change, this too will change, right? So we just have to go from the previous state to the next state. All right. Okay, so yeah, right now I just defined this thing and it came out of nowhere. All right, so I'll let you know why we are using that actually. Okay, so say that I'll only explain it in 2D in a 2D plot. It will be difficult for me in 3D. So say that this was the convex function that we have, and we start off at somewhere over here, right? So here you can see, uh, here you can see. Uh, okay, one thing also I forgot to mention. This alpha is called the learning rate. Learning rate, and this is always a positive quantity. All right. So over here, this is a plot of theta. Say for now, this is just theta naught, and this is the loss j of theta naught and theta 1. Yeah. So over here, you can see theta naught. It would this would evaluate to theta naught minus alpha rho of dot theta naught j of theta naught comma theta 1. Right now, this slope is positive, right? You can see the slope is positive. So this would give some positive quantity. So theta naught, it would be theta naught minus alpha into some positive quantity. Hence, the value of theta naught in this state, it will reduce and it would come more towards the minima, right? Similarly, if say the point was over here, right? So again, this would turn out to be theta naught minus alpha, but you can see the slope here is actually negative, right? So it would be theta naught minus alpha into some negative quantity, and hence the value of theta naught in this state will actually increase. So again, it would come towards the minima. So I hope you get some intuition about why why we are employing this algorithm. All right. Okay. One note about choosing alpha or the learning rate. All right. So say if my curve was something like this, and okay, there are two cases. If the value of alpha was too small, right? If the value of alpha was too small, so if I was over here, then it would take many number of steps to reach the minima, right? But at the same time, if the value of alpha was too large, right? So if I'm over here and I'm at this point currently, if the value of alpha is too large, it might just overshoot the minima. It should have optimally reached over here, but it might overshoot the minima like this, and it might if the value of alpha is still large, it might even diverge, going on away like this, and it will never reach the minima. So what I want to say is that the value of alpha, you should choose it properly by employing various methods. We'll let you know about that later. So that ends our detour, and we come back to the gradient descent for linear regression. All right. So you might remember this was a problem initially. So h theta of x was this, and this was our cost function, and we are again trying to just employ it over here. All right. Dinesh, hello.
Uh, yeah, just looking at. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'm just trying to find the best possible values for theta naught and theta 1 using the gradient descent algorithm I just discussed above. All right. So yeah. Okay. So if you put if you partially differentiate this with respect to theta naught and then dou of theta 1, it's a very simple derivative. You can do it simply. You'll end up at something like this. I hope it's clear. Repeat until convergence. These two things. It's exactly the same thing, right? I've just differentiated it and then put the values over here. And we are updating theta naught and theta 1 simultaneously. All right. So that I think sums up. Yeah. So one other thing. For above, we only discussed it about the size of house, right, in feet square. Like I said, that there might be age of the house, the locality of the house, and other parameters, other features. Sorry. So say I had many features. Say they were x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on. Right? Say or let's take them finite. Say I had 5 features uh, for my problem. So how would at that time we just wrote our hypothesis function as theta naught plus theta 1 x. But remember again that this is a linear regression problem. So any number of features, we will just extend it as theta 2 x1 x2 plus theta 3 x3 plus theta 4 x4 and so on, whatever it is. Now you must have already studied matrices. You know that we can write this as, okay, first of all, say my theta, I define them in the form of matrices. Theta is theta naught, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, theta 4, something like that. Yeah. and X is my feature matrix. This is my parameter, and this is my features. All right. And this is X1, X2, X3, X4, X5, and however many features I have. So we can write this multiplication or the hypothesis function as simply theta transpose multiplied by the matrix of X. All right. This is exactly the same. You just transpose and multiply it one by one. So for multiple features, everything above that we studied, gradient descent, cost function, everything remains same. Only the value of hypothesis changes to this. All right. So I'll give you 30 seconds. If you have any question, ask them, or we'll move on to logistic regression.
Bhaiya,
Yes.
can you explain again that simultaneous that we have to update the theta naught and theta 1 simultaneously?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So what I meant by this was, let me take a smaller example. Okay, say that I have two values, x1 equal to 1, x2 equal to 2. Hold on. X1 equal to 2x1. All right, this is my value. I have a function something like this, and I'm saying it that move from this state to the other state and square both these numbers, right? This is the state 1. For this state, the value of x1 is 1 and the value of x2 is twice of x1, which is 2. So when I move on to the next state, I don't, what I want is for the values to be x1 equal to 1 and x2 equal to 4, right? The square of these two values. But if I don't do simultaneous updates, right? If I do them one by one, all right, say this was 2 initially. So this is 2 times of 4. And I want this to be 2 to the 4 and 4 for the 16. All right, this is what I want for the next state to be. So if I do them one by one, for instance, if I square the number x1 first, this will be twice square of 2, 4. And then x2 will become 4 to the 8, right? At that moment, 4 to the 8. And after that, it will get squared. So this will become 64. It is something like this. I might have made it a little confusing. So what I mean was that you do this simultaneously. So you first calculate the value of this and assign it to a temporary variable. Then you calculate this and then again assign it to a temporary variable, right? And after that, you do theta naught and theta 1 assignment like this. But if you do it, if you first calculate the value of this and then directly assign it to theta naught, right? So at that moment, due to this, the value of j of theta naught and theta 1 will change, right? Because this is not totally independent. This function is not independent of theta. Yeah. Hopefully, hello, the one who asked the question.
Yeah, bhaiya, I
Do you
got it.
understand?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, bhaiya.
Okay. Okay. So let's move on to logistic regression. So logistic regression is okay. The linear regression is one of the algorithms that can solve problems for us, right? But you must remember that the linear regression, the hypothesis function, it gave the value in ranges of minus infinity to infinity or any real value, right? It gave us real value. But sometimes, but in classification problems, we actually want it to be discrete set of values, right? Say I'm classifying an image into cats and dogs. This image can't take 1.2 values, right? It can either be of 0 class or 1 class. Similarly, if I have many classes, so it just takes some discrete set of values. It is, the analogy is something like an analog function and digital function, something like that. For instance, I'll give you examples. Say if I'm getting an email, I have to classify it in as a spam or not spam email. Or say if I'm doing a online transaction, then I have to classify it as if it is fraudulent or not fraudulent. So for now, we'll only discuss classification of two things, right? Or this is called binary classification or 0-1 classification, right? We are not considering multiple classes for now. Similarly, another example is if I'm classifying a tumor, it can be malignant. Malignant means that the tissue has tumor, and benign means it is just a lump and it's not harmful, right? So again, like I said, this for now we'll only be considering binary classification, 0-1 classification, right? So yeah, say that for a tumor example, I have a plot of, again, this is the true values that I got from the data set. Okay, on my x-axis I have the tumor size, and on y if it is malignant or not. Notice how they are taking discrete set of values and not something intermediate in between, right? So yeah. Uh, okay, yeah. If I was to do some linear regression algorithm on this thing, so my best fitting line might be something like this or something like this. Again, for any value, it might have given me something very weird, right? So we need a better classification algorithm so that it classifies discretely into 0 or 1 depending on the size of the tumor. All right. The same thing he has explained over here. I'll go on. Yeah. Okay, so now for the logistic regression, we want to find the hypothesis function again, like we did in the case of linear regression. Right. Only after that we can move on how to define loss and everything. Okay, so there is a function called sigmoid function. Sigmoid function, and it is represented as g of z is equal to 1 upon 1 plus e power minus z. All right. If you plot this curve, you will see that it is something, or it's actually down below. It is just look at this part. It is something like this, right? So whatever value you give in the real range, any value, it just plots it and maps it to a range between 0 and 1, right? So now we have a way of plotting our h theta of x that we got from the linear regression and then just mapping it to a range between value between 0 and 1. Okay, so yeah, like I said, for this, yeah, one other thing that here we are not just considering one feature. All right, there's an entire feature matrix. It can be any number of features, but now we do not care about it, right? So in linear, just to be very clear, in linear regression, s theta of x was theta transpose of x. But now in logistic regression, what we would do, we would take the same value from this and just map it using this sigmoid function. All right. So it would give us a value belonging to 0, open 0 and 1. Yeah. So, okay, one other thing you might notice, I'll just mention it over here. So if say for some value x, you get a value between 0 and 1. So because this plot is giving you values between 0 and 1, you can also consider them as probabilities, right? So if say I'm getting something like 0.7, then this means that I have 70% chance that my value is 1, right? Similarly, if you have something like 0.3, it says that there is only 30% chance that my value is actually 1. You can model it as probability, but it is not really necessary. But as a general rule, if the value that we achieve from this sigmoid function is greater than 0.5, it lies in this range, then we take it as 1. I mean, the output classified as 1. And if it is less than this over here, then we consider this as 0, as the class 0. All right. I hope it's clear. And I guess it is very intuitive why we are doing so. Okay. Okay, one other thing. Okay, I'll just explain it. So say that we had a plot over here, and there were some classes 0, 0, 0. Something like this, right? So there are only two classes. 0 is the first class and X is 1. All right, you can define it something like this. Now there is you can see clearly that there is some sort of boundary that separates these two, right? This boundary, using which we can make a decision about which case any random value lies on. Say if I had a totally different value, I mean after training, I had a value lying somewhere over here. This is a square, say. So if I need to predict whether this lies this is a circle or an X, we can just make a decision depending on where it lies, corresponding to the decision boundary. So this divide that separates them, this is called the decision boundary. All right, it is a very, I guess, I think you understand it. I'll give you an example about this if we have time left. All right. Another thing that I want to mention is that decision boundaries aren't always linear, right? In some case, it might be linear, but it is not always true. See, for example, here, this is something, a decision boundary will be something like a circle. If any values lie inside it, then it will be 0 and outside it will be X, right? I just want to mention that. Many people get confused on that. Okay. So now that we have defined our hypothesis function as this, we move on to the next step. What is the next step? We now define a cost function, and after we define the cost function, we'll move on trying to minimize it, right? So the cost function. Yeah, this is again some notation for you so that you don't get confused. All right, just look at this. This x1 and y. There's x1 and y1. X is again the features, and y is the corresponding value output through it, right? And I have this m test cases, m data points in my graph, right? And again, this is the feature matrix, and again, hypothesis function is this. This is nothing but the same one. You just we have just expanded theta t of x, right? Now again, our problem becomes how to choose parameters theta, but before that, we define a cost function on that. Okay. So before, if you remember how in linear regression or cost function or j of theta, that was 1 upon 2m summation I equal to 1 over m. This m is the same here. We have m over here. I mean the number of data points. And then what we did was h theta of x of I minus y of I, and we squared it, right? If however we were to do this exact same thing right now, I mean in case of logistic regression, because the h theta of x is different, we won't end up at a convex function. Instead our function would have looked something like this, right? I mean something very different. I'm plotting this theta versus j of theta. Basically what I mean to say is that it wouldn't necessarily have been a convex function. What was a convex function again? A convex function had just one minima, right? So this one might have a lot of minimas. And if we were to use gradient descent on it, we would end up at a local minima and not the global one. I mean, the best fitting decision boundary, we wouldn't get that. So now we need to change our cost function actually. So because we can't always use this. So I'll write down the cost function first, and yeah, one thing. So the cost function, uh, okay, over here, j of theta equal to 1 upon 2m summation I equal to 1, say m. And for now, I'm just writing this as cost of hypothesis of x minus y. Sorry. Yeah. This cost, I'm just writing it over here because it would have been difficult to write it as one. But h theta of x and y, this is nothing but minus log of h theta of x if y is equal to 1 and minus log of 1 minus h theta of x if y equal to 0. All right, I'll explain this. If the second year writes, you might have if you have gone through the course of probability and statistics, this you get this very, you can get this very easily using the maximum likelihood estimation. All right, if I this exact thing comes from maximum likelihood estimation. You just put the log on both the sides and then differentiate it. All right, but for now we'll ignore that. But I will give you an intuition of why this loss actually works. So if you were to plot it, all right, let's take two cases. Y equal to 1. This y is the true value. All right. For now we are doing training. Because we are doing training, if the value of y is actually 1, then the cost is defined by this. Why so? If I were to plot this one for y equal to 1, right, you would get something. You know, the graph for ln is 1. It comes from over here, right? This is for ln x simply. So for negative of it, it would just move on like this, right? So this will be something like this, and below, yeah, this is the cost. So if the value of y is truly 1 and our output that our classifier gives is also 1, that is or is near to 1, then you can see that the cost is very less. However, if our value is truly 1 and the output that our hypothesis gives hypothesis gives is actually 0, something like 0, so you can see the loss increases infinitely, right? So I hope you can get a feel of why we are using this graph. If you have any doubts, put them in the chat or I'll explain it in the end. Similarly, if y equal to if y was 0, we plot this curve over here. This comes out to be something like this, right? This is 0 and this is 1. You can plot it very easily. I hope no one has problem plotting graphs. So so over here, if the value of y is truly 0 and the hypothesis mistakenly predicted it as 1, so again you can see that the cost is infinite, right? And similarly, if y value is 0 and it is 0, the loss is very less as it gets closer to the true value, right? Which this is the reason why we use this. This guy has explained the same. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So the cost that I wrote over here, I mean, this over here, this I can write it in a simplified form. This exact same thing as cost h theta of x over y is equal to minus y log of h theta of x minus 1 minus y log of 1 minus h theta of x. This is exactly the same as above. I'm just writing it in a simplified form. If you put the value of y equal to 1 over here, so this term would end up getting 0 and only this will remain. Similarly, if the y value was 0, this term would end up 0 and you would just get this, right? I'm just writing it in a simplified form because it is used. So this is finally our loss. So we have done two steps. We have defined the hypothesis. Next, we have also defined the cost function. The third step is left, which is how to minimize this, right? Yeah. So again, he's here. So the cost function is again this, and we have just put the value from over here to here. All right, so our final cost function is this. Okay, again, the problem is something similar to what we did in linear regression. We need to find the value of theta such that this loss, this cost is minimized, right? Which is the best fitting decision boundary. Okay, so again, we come back to gradient descent because because initially our graph was something like this if we would have used this as our cost function, but because we use this as a cost function, our graph now becomes convex function. All right, there is some a lot of maths behind it, but you can prove it very easily. You just need to differentiate it partially with this curve partially, and you would find that it has only one minima, right? You can do it, but I won't do it right now. If anyone has a problem, then he can message me. Okay. Again, so now that our curve is convex, again we need to find again we need to find such theta that our cost function g of theta is minimized, right? So yeah, if you remember the gradient descent that we discussed just now, it is this. So if again, if I do the derivation of dou theta j of theta partially first, yeah, if I do the derivative on theta j, right, this term, this is a very simple derivation. This h theta of x would go become 1 by this, and the theta, you can do a very simple derivation, right? Uh, the derivative is simple. So it actually dou theta j of j theta, this comes out to be this term right over here. It's a very simple derivation, right? So I'm just going to plug this over here, and I would end up at this term, right? Repeat, theta j is equal to theta j minus alpha and this term. Now you might notice this how similar this looks to what we had for linear regression. We had exactly this term right over there. So except that h theta of x of I was just theta transpose of x over there in linear regression. But right now our h theta of x is actually g of theta transpose of x, which is this term. Yeah, it except that it looks almost identical to what we had for linear regression. Okay, so one thing I would say that what the to find the best theta, right now we are just using gradient descent, right? But there are as Rohan will show you in the implementation part, there are some advanced algorithms too. I'm just mentioning it right there right now, so you don't get confused when he teaches it to you. All right, so that concludes our part for binary classification, for 0-1 classification. I hope you get that. But again, what if there was multiple number of classes, right? Say I had 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This as my number of classes, and I had to classify an image or something into one of these classes. So what would we do then? For instance, say this is my problem. I have 3 classes. So it is exactly similar like above. What we use what is called one versus all or one versus rest, right? I'm for the first solve. I'm just going to consider my class 0 as triangles and everything that is not triangle as 1, right? Depending on that, I am going to find the decision boundary. Similarly, for the next solve, I'm going to consider squares, these squares as my 0 and everything that is not square as 1. All right, I'll do the same for these x. I'll consider them as 0 and everything that is not x as 1. So depending on this, for after the 3 solves, we would get 3 decision boundaries. And depending on that, we'll solve the problem. This is just called one versus rest or one versus all method. Yeah. All right. So yeah, again, I'll just say 2 or 3 lines on how we train and test data, so that you don't get confused when we show you the implementation. So everywhere you'll have some sort of data set, a large data set. Say it has 100 samples, right, or 100 points that I showed you, right? Say it has 100 points of x and y. X is again the features, and y is the output that we're trying to we want. So initially the data set would be given to you of both these points, right? So when you train, you normally divide this data set into say something like 60% training and 40% testing data. Why you do this and not just train on 100% of the data? Because you need to find out how your algorithm that you just trained is doing on data set that it has not yet seen, right? So that is why we take something like 75% or something, depending on what you want, on how much data you actually have. You just divide it into training data, training data set, and testing data set. All right, that is all. Rohan, over to you.
Thank you, Piyush. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. I hope am I audible clearly?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay, okay. My screen is visible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I will proceed with the implementation part of whatever theory was taught today by Piyush. So we will be doing this whole thing on something called Google Colab. So if you can just Google search it in this manner and click on this collab.research.google, and so what this is it is a free service provided by Google, wherein you can run Python Jupyter notebooks for and use GPUs to train them if you want to create deep learning models. We will be looking at deep learning models soon in the next workshop. But the thing is that if you want to train them, it requires a lot of compute power and GPU power, sometimes which your laptop might not be capable of. So like they provide free GPUs for your use. You should just go to runtime, then change runtime type, and here you can just select GPU. Then it will automatically assign a GPU to your instance, and you are good to go. And the additional thing is that it comes with all the basic packages, libraries of Python installed, pre-installed, so you don't have to. Okay, hang on a second. Yeah, so as I said, you don't have to set up your environment from scratch. You can just use the pre-installed libraries. But let's say, for example, you want to install uh, NumPy, for example. So you can just put exclamation mark pip install NumPy, and it will and then press shift enter to run the cell. It will just fetch it and install it for you if it was not installed. But it, like I said, many of the basic libraries come installed already. uh, Same is the case with NumPy. So the code that I will be showing you today, I already have it written out. So first we will be looking at linear regression. So what we do is we import NumPy and matplotlib. Then we import our linear regression model from this library, sklearn or scikit-learn. And to find our error or our loss function, it's also called cost function. It has many names. We import this function, mean squared error. Now this is nothing but it is you don't have to know much about it. It is just required to generate random data, random numbers. So what I have done here is in this line I have just generated a NumPy array of dimensions 100 cross 1. 100 cross 1 is nothing but 100 rows and one column. So it's a linear array of 100 elements. and y is nothing but we multiply 3 into x. So what that will do, it will just multiply every element in x with 3, and then we add 2 to every element, and we also add a random factor to every element, which is another 100 cross one dimensional numpy array. So we are just adding noise to our initial function or equation. So now let me just run this code. So I have just a second. So I have used matplotlib to plot all these points. So this graph, I'll tell you how it has been plotted. So we use this dot scatter function to plot points, or rather an array of multiple points. So here x is nothing but all the x coordinates in my array, and y is all the y coordinates in my array. So what it does is it takes the first element in x and first element in y, and makes that a point x1 comma y1 and plots it in the graph. Similarly, second element of x and second element of y will get paired up and become another point, and so on. So we get 100 points on the graph. And this is just the labels of the x and y axes. So what we've done is we have just created a randomly scattered data set of points, which are which if you think about, let me show you one thing here. So if I want to check out what this array will look like, I can just paste it here and then run it using shift enter, and it will show you how what are the contents of this whole entity. So you can see that it has values, random numbers between the range of 0 and 1. It has 100 different values like that. So you can so this whole thing and this quantity will have an average value of 0.5, right? Because 0.5 comes in the exact center of 0 and 1. And so this thing on average will approach 0.5, and when you add 0.5 to 2, you'll this whole line will tend towards this y is equal to 2.5 plus 3x. So this plot that you see, it is y is equal to 2.5 plus 3x itself, but some randomness is added to it. So what we are trying to do in our toy example is we are just trying to learn the best fitting line for this, just for demonstration purposes. So moving on. Now what I do is I call just a second. I call my linear regression function, which we imported from sklearn, and we create a model. We initialize a model. Then we use this fit function to train the model. So the gradient descent and simultaneous update of theta naught, theta 1, etc. all that will happen in this one step itself. This step will run for multiple iterations, and it will find the best fitting line. So all of that theory which of optimization and finding the minima, you just need this one function to do the whole process. So after this, if you want to check the slope and intercept of your line, you can just do dot coef underscore and dot intercept underscore, and it will print them out. Let us see it. So it has found our best fitting line, which has a slope of 2.9 and an intercept of 2.5. We will. I'll comment on those values more shortly. And then what we did is we also predicted. We used the dot predict function to use our model to predict all the y values for the for all the x values, like the corresponding x values. So so now y predicted is just another array of 100 elements, all the predicted values. This RMSE is just the root mean squared error. So we just y is my actual y which we want to predict, correct? Which is the true value of y. Y predicted is what the model thought it was. When we run this function, what it does is it just finds the difference between every corresponding element in this, squares it and adds them up, all the 100 values, and we end up with a not a very bad error of 0.07. Let me show you the visualization of the line. This line, we can see it is like very nicely fitting the points. So here again, this S is plt.scatter I explained. S is nothing but the size of the each point, and plt.plot is used for drawing a line. So means we have 100 elements here, 100 elements here. So it again just drew a line through connecting all those 100 points. And so you can see that it is quite a nice fit to the data. So like I said that the line will tend towards this y is equal to 2.5 plus 3x. Even if you check see the values which we got here, you can see slope is almost 3 and intercept is almost 2.5. So even hello, yeah. So even practically we can see that the data has been correctly modeled. So that was the first basic example, and Piyush also touched on a house data like house value prediction example, which I will show you the practical implementation of. So this data set is actually available in Colab. It's already there. You don't have to load it. So I just imported it from here. You can see California Housing Train.csv. And this use the head function to show you the first 5 elements in this data set. So you can see that there are multiple features, and this is our target value which we want to predict. So given the total rooms, total bedrooms, population of the area, etc., etc., we want to find out how much that house might sell for if it is sold. So we create our features and feature set and our labels. Xtrain is nothing but my features. So for that I just drop out the column median house value because that is what we want to predict, and ytrain is my median house value. So that is my labels. That is nothing but my labels. And this code is in fact quite the exact same as we had in the previous example. We just use this function to initiate the model. We dot fit to okay, 1 minute, I think. Okay, so we use the dot fit to train our model, and then again we find out the error. So here you can see that we get multiple slope values because for every feature x1, x2, x3 you will have a different theta1, theta2, theta3. I hope you understand that. That's why like you get as many slopes as many features you have. This is my intercept, and it is this high because the prices of those houses are also in it's in 10,000 or it's quite a high value, so that's why the intercept is this big, and even the error is coming out to be that big because when you find out the error, like when you do y predicted minus y actual and then square up and add it over all the examples, over the 10,000 examples, you will end up having a very high value. So, and another reason is that linear regression is not a very advanced model. It cannot learn every type of data. It can only learn linear distributions of data. So it in this case, you can say that it did not do a very good job of modeling our data, but you will learn more advanced techniques which in the coming workshops which will help you to reduce this error and better predict the house prices. So let us just take a look at what y predicted is. So you can see that suppose in the second example, it predicted the value to be 73,000, but the actual values are 80,000, so quite close. And in some cases, it is just giving us very wrong answers, such as minus negative values. So these kind of values are what cause the error to jump up to such a high level. I'm done with logistic regression, linear regression demonstration. So if you have any doubts regarding this, you can ask me now, or you can type it in the chat.
Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have any doubts.
Hello, Rohit.
Yeah.
Here I have a doubt that the function is regression model dot fit and
Yeah.
X train and Y train. So, like, what should be the type of X train and Y train? They should be NumPy arrays or any list, normal list.
They can be NumPy arrays. They can be for example, my X train here it's a pandas data frame over here. It's not a NumPy array, so it can be many things. In this case, it is a pandas data frame. In our previous example, it was a NumPy array. In here, it was a NumPy array. So there are many options.
Okay.
Okay. Any other queries?
You just need to remember one thing, that whatever the type of data set you are training it on, you must also always test it on the same type of data set. All right, they can't be different once you have trained the model. Okay.
Yeah, in the next example, we will also look at dividing our data set into testing and training sets. So it will become more clear over there. So if you have no more doubts regarding this, I will proceed to logistic regression. So this is quite similar, in fact, to linear regression. The code is quite similar. So let's begin. So here I'm going to work on the digits dataset. It is a pre-available dataset from sklearn, which you just use by calling this function load digits. So and the thing is, this dataset, if you put digits.data, that will be your X train. It will be your features or the input data, and digits.target is nothing but the labels. So which digit it is, that is digits.target. So I'm just checking out the shape of these entities. So I can see that there are 1797 samples in my data set, and each of those samples is an array of 64 elements. So how this is, how these 64 elements represent a digits image. I'll show you that now. We import matplotlib and numpy as before. So image is just the first element in this digits.data, and I've just printed that, and I've again after that I've reshaped it to 8 cross 8 and printed that as well. Now after reshaping it, I'm using matplotlib to just show you the image for your clarity. So the array initially was like this. It was a linear array with all these elements. So I just reshaped it in this format. Now it's a 2D array wherein the first row will be these elements, the second row will be these elements, and etc. etc. And when you use matplotlib to plot this, all the zeros will just become black pixels, and anything other than 0 is just a shade of gray. Like how the higher the value, the whiter it is. So 15 is really white, and the other values are slightly lesser than 15, which are grayish. So this is an image of 0, like an 8 cross 8, a very low resolution image of 0. So we will just use logistic regression to try to classify the images like this. So this is where we divide the dataset into training and testing sets. So for that we use this train test split function from sklearn. So it might look a bit confusing, but I'll walk you through it step by step. So test size is the main thing here. It is just telling you how much of your data set you want to have in your testing set. So here 1/4 of my data set would be used for testing, and the model will not train on that. The model will only train on 3/4 of the data set, and this testing set will be used for finding out the accuracy of my model, to see how it generalizes to unseen data. And so digits.data, as I said, it's the features or the array, 64 dimensional arrays, and target is the labels. So that is what goes inside these parentheses, and the output of this function is just is 4 things. So the left half is x or the features, and right half is the labels, and X train is the training labels, Y train is the testing label. Sorry, X train is training labels, and Y train is I'm sorry. X train is training features, and Y train is training labels, and same with X test and Y test. So that's how the function works. Then we again import logistic regression, and we initialize it in this manner. So here the thing is, there is a parameter called max iteration, or it's just max iter. So it's what it is when you do gradient descent or any other optimization, you know, obviously know that you have to do multiple iterations of that. Like you have to update the values of theta naught, theta 1, etc. multiple times before you reach the minima. So this is just nothing but the maximum number of iterations the model will do before it terminates execution of this code. So then we use fit as before, and here we are predicting 3 elements of X test. 0, this is nothing but NumPy slicing, which was explained in the previous workshop. And as you know, 3 is not included, so it will take 0, 1, 2, the first 3 samples, and it will predict what it thinks those values are. So when I run it, I get a warning saying that LBFGS failed to converge. So what is this LBFGS? LBFGS is just a slightly advanced version of gradient descent. So it is another optimization function, which but it is slightly more advanced, and we don't really need to know how in depth about how it works. Just know that that is what is being used here in our model. So it seems that 100 iterations were not enough for it to reach the global minima. So let me try increasing it to 500. Again, it tells me the same thing. So let's make it something like 2000. Okay, it's still giving me the same warning. Let's go with 4000 and see. Yeah, now after 4000, I mean, no, that is maximum. Like before 4000 iterations, the model was able to converge to the minima, and it was able to like reduce the loss function to an appreciable extent. And it thinks that the first three examples in X test are 6, 4, and 2. So let us just try that out and see what they really are. Y test is the true labels. So it turns out that our model predicted it correctly. So because the answers match in both cases. And so then as a final step, you can use this accuracy score function. So what you do is you just predict you get y predicted, and you just use accuracy score to compare y test and y predicted. So what it does is it just sees how many times the model predicted it correctly, and divides that by the total number of examples we have, and then prints that value. So we get 95% accuracy here, which is quite good, in fact. So what we like in summary, what we did was we just took like this 64 dimensional array, then we just fed that, we just split that to training and testing sets using this function, and then we fit xtrain. We used xtrain to fit our logistic regression model, and then we just made prediction on x test, and we checked out the accuracy. So then that does it for logistic regression. So if you have any queries regarding this, you can ask them now.
Okay, guys, listen. One thing. Last wali workshop में या अभी भी you might feel scared about all this code. All right. So one thing I'll say that you need not remember anything. All right. रोहन एक बार documentation दिखा देना कैसे देखते हैं. Everything is available online, right? Everything is available in the documentation. He'll just show you.
So if you want to, like for example, say know more about logistic regression, you can let me just type logistic regression here. Now the first link itself is the scikit-learn documentation, which is the official one. So you can just go in here and see all the things that you can change, etc. So like for example, our solver here was LBFGS, as I said.
रोहन वीडियो थोड़ा लैग है. हाँ.
अच्छा.
अभी न्यू टैब खुला है.
Okay.
हाँ सही है. अभी बोल.
So you can see that these are all the parameters in our model which you can change. I mean, you don't need to go through each and every one of them. Like you will find out like which one of them are very relevant and which are not. So for example, our solver here was LBFGS, as I mentioned. You can change that to let me show you. Yeah, there are 5 options like Newton CG, Lip Linear, Saga, etc. And there are many other things that you can try out. If you we'll be sharing the notebook. Of course, you can make changes and do experimentation of your own. So, and like one more thing is that I would encourage you to definitely not just go through the theory, but also like beforehand itself, like go through this, like try out this code and try to learn what each segment of code does, so that when the event dates come near, you won't have to like sit and break your head with all the code, because that time it will become quite hard in to manage in that time. So if you know beforehand what each code does, you can just copy the code from one place and use it in your event time, whatever what you are doing. So that will like speed up things for you, and it will also improve your understanding.
If anyone has any questions, feel free. You're free to ask. Okay.
You can also message any of us with your queries, and we'll be happy to answer them.
But one thing, one thing we really want you to learn is how to search things on Google. Right, everything is available. You need to learn. You need to get a feel about all this, because you won't be implementing everything that I taught you in theory. Right, there are pre-built functions already available, but you need to have a good feel about them so you can modify the parameters and like Rohan showed you, change the different optimization algorithms and everything. And everything is available in the documentation online. All right, so Dinesh.
Yes, guys. If anyone else has doubts, you can ask them right now. Otherwise, I guess we'll be passing on the feedback form in the same Teams. Just fill it out regarding today's workshop. We'll also pass it on in the events groups. Someone else has doubts, you can ask now.